Hello, my name is Peter Demaria. I'm a partner at Doyle Clayton in the City of London. Today I'm going to be talking to you about interns and the legal risks involved. We're finding that many employers are turning to interns in these difficult economic times. There are, however, legal risks involved in engaging interns, and there is a danger that some organisations are seeing interns as nothing more than a free source of labour which is without risk. However, it is important before you do engage interns to think carefully about how you're going to engage them, whether they will have any risks, and also think carefully about what tasks you give them. The reason for this is that the legal status of interns is not clear. It is possible that if you do engage an intern, that person could be a worker for you, or it could be that they are your employee. It is important in looking at what the intern does in practice to determine what legal rights will apply to that particular relationship. For example, the person who's an employee will be entitled to claim unfair dismissal, and after 2 years they'll be entitled to a statutory redundancy payment. If the person does not attain the status of being an employee, but they do gain the rates of being a worker, then we're looking at someone who's got an entitlement to be paid at least the national minimum wage, and they also have rights under the working time regulations to rest breaks and to accrued holiday. The risk, therefore, is that if employers take on interns and then assume that there are no legal risks and that they need not be paid, that you can trample over these rights and you could face claims. Now, the claims may only be, for example, if the person is a worker, that the intern, when they were with you, should have received the national minimum wage, and so it may not sound like there's a huge financial risk. However, I would also say that the unions are very hot on this topic at the moment, and there's been a number of cases where the financial risks may not have been great to the organisations involved, but the reputational risks have been far greater. When you're approaching how you wish to engage with an intern, I would suggest that you look carefully at exactly what you're going to be asking them to do, and also think as an organisation as to how you want to manage the certain risks involved. I would say that the majority of people who have been asking us about interns are quite happy to pay them because they accept that they are workers and they will attain worker status in law. And so many organisations will pay at least the national minimum wage and then treat the intern as a worker, giving them accrued holiday and the rights which follow. There are, however, also organisations who wish to treat the interns as people who are not working. They wish to engage them in a way which means that they won't be entitled to the national minimum wage, and we've seen numerous employers, particularly in the fashion industry, to name but one, where there have been lengthy internships which have been unpaid. There is one particular organisation which has been advertising for interns, and those internships have been for 9 months, where the individual would not receive even the national minimum wage. And this is something which has given rise to the HMRC saying that they're going to be launching a task force to go after certain organisations who have not been paying the national minimum wage to interns. Now, if you will be getting on board interns and your aim is not to be paying them, then you have to tread with caution. But there are certain tips you can take on board to minimise your risks. First of all, you've got to be careful that the person who's coming in as an intern will not be working for you. Their contribution to your organisation and the work effort should be minimal. Ideally, they should be work shadowing rather than actually doing tasks. Following on from that, you shouldn't be giving them too much in the way of sort of defined tasks to do, or giving them anything that could amount to work. And so the idea is that there's a relaxed relationship, there's flexibility in the relationship. The hours should be minimum recommended hours rather than required hours. When it comes to the tasks they are undertaking, these should be supervised. They shouldn't be adding too much value to the organisation. And on top of that, we'd recommend that the intern is given learning objectives rather than defined tasks. We're often asked about expenses. Should the person be given an expense allowance? Should the person be paid expenses? Well, our recommendation, if you're going to be having a genuine intern who is not a worker, is that you have to tread carefully when it comes to expenses. There have been cases where certain individuals have been paid an expense allowance. For example, someone may be given something like £40 a week as an expense allowance. That is paid to the volunteer or intern, even if the person is off sick and even if they're on holiday. Now, that has been seen by tribunals as something which could be a wage rather than a genuine expense. And so our recommendation is that you look carefully at what people are being paid for expenses, and the ideal situation is they are only paid expenses when they hand in a receipt for a genuine work expense. We are often asked whether, once you've got the interns on board, they should be given anything in writing. Should there be a contract in place, or should there just be a document which sets out the expectations of the parties? Well, in our experience, again, it will depend on the legal status of the person involved, which, as I've explained, will depend on exactly what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. And so if you are having someone in the workplace who is going to be working, then I'd recommend that you set out in a document what is expected on both sides. You may, for example, say you will be paying them something. You will set out how expenses will be treated. And the document will take the form of a short employment contract, and there's no harm in doing that generally. If the person is an intern, in the truest sense, and the person is going to be someone who will not be receiving the national minimum wage, then again, this is an area for caution. I would recommend that in those instances, what you should be doing is still having something in place, but you should avoid having a contract as such. But a document which puts a framework around the relationship would be sensible. Something which sets out the minimum hours that they would be asked to attend, not necessarily setting out set contractual hours, more of an expectation. And then in terms of what they will be doing, it would be useful to have some learning objectives set out so that there is, again, a framework around the tasks they may be doing. I would also recommend that you name anyone who will be a mentor for them rather than a line manager, and also set out how expenses will be treated. In terms of recruitment, this is something where it's very much up to your organisation and your ethos. It may be that in the past, many interns have joined you and they've come through an old boy network, or they've been arranged at the golf club rather than through the normal routes you would adopt when recruiting an employee. Now, my advice to an organisation would be to stick to what you know best. It may be that what you've been doing in the past works very well. However, there are many recommendations appearing from the governments and also unions in relation to social mobility. We're hearing from the government and a strategy paper which appeared earlier this year, which is recommending that internships are paid and that employers cast the net very wide when recruiting for interns. The reason for this is that interns have been seen as the preserve of the well-off, shall we say. And in an effort to improve social mobility, it would be far better for society in general if interns were to be paid something, so it would open it up to a larger section of society. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you'd like to contact us, the number's below on the screen.